He fled his own wedding in an Uber, and the driver was his ex-fiancé. What they discovered together will shock you. Desperate, he fled the altar and called an Uber. During the ride, he discovered the driver was also getting married that same date to his ex-girlfriend. Together, they uncovered a truth that destroyed both weddings. Act 1. The escape and the unexpected encounter. The suit was too tight, not to cut the air. Thomas felt the fabric pressing his shoulders as if someone were pushing him down, forcing him to stay planted at the altar. The smell of white flowers, lily, roses, something too sweet, mixed with the expensive perfume of 200 guests behind him. He heard the low murmur, impatient, waiting. The priest in front smiled with that professional serenity of someone who'd conducted this 1,000 times. To his right, his best man adjusted his tie, nervous by proxy. Thomas looked at the door at the back of the hall, where Lauren should enter any moment, and felt his right hand go instinctively to the inner pocket of his jacket. The envelope was there, small, folded, with her handwriting but not exactly hers. He'd found the envelope 3 days earlier, fallen behind the dresser in the bedroom they shared. Inside, a short letter addressed to M, signed with the nickname Lauren used only with him. Your L. The content was intimate. Whispered promises, future plans. Can't wait for us to really begin. The date at the top. 2 weeks ago. Thomas reread it 5 times, searching for an innocent explanation. An old draft, a letter to himself, written in an affectionate moment, but M wasn't his name. And really begin sounded like something still to come, not the wedding 3 days away. The music started. The wedding march. Thomas felt his entire body lock. The priest made a subtle gesture for him to position himself better, but his feet didn't move. He saw the door open, Lauren's silhouette outlined against the hallway light, the white dress shining. She was smiling. That smile he thought he knew. And then, without thinking, without planning, Thomas turned and walked toward the side exit. His steps were mechanical. He crossed the sacristy, pushed the service door, came out to the parking lot. Behind him, the murmur transformed into audible confusion. Voices rising, someone shouting his name. He didn't look back. His hands trembled when he grabbed his phone and opened the rideshare app. The first available driver was 2 minutes away. Thomas accepted without reading the name, without checking the rating. He just needed to get out of there. The outside air was cold, cutting, different from the suffocating heat of the church. He breathed deep, feeling the tightness in his chest loosen slightly. The envelope was still in his pocket. He touched it again, as if it were a reverse charm. Proof he wasn't crazy. A silver Honda Civic stopped in front of him. The driver, a man in his 30s, waved briefly. Thomas got in the back seat, closed the door, and sank into the seat. Good afternoon, the driver said with automatic cordiality. His voice had a slight tremor, as if he too were nervous. Thomas just nodded. The car started moving, leaving the church parking lot behind. He watched through the window the familiar city streets, the trees he saw every day, the shops where he bought coffee. Everything seemed the same and completely different at once. There was a strange relief in being there, protected by the anonymous bubble of a stranger's car, but also growing guilt. What had he just done? Fled his own wedding, left Lauren at the altar, humiliated both of them in front of everyone. What if he was wrong? What if there was an explanation? But there was M, and there was really begin. The driver adjusted the rearview mirror, and Thomas saw him better for the first time. Black suit, dark blue tie, hairstyled with gel. Too formal for a Saturday afternoon driving Uber. On the passenger seat, a bouquet of red roses wrapped in cellophane, still with the florist's tag attached. Thomas frowned. Strange. Sorry, the driver said, breaking the silence. He sounded genuinely embarrassed. I know it's not very professional, but I need to make a quick delivery after your ride. Hope you don't mind. Thomas shrugged. No problem. It's just that today is an important day, the driver continued, almost to himself. He gripped the steering wheel hard, knuckles turning white. Very important. Thomas didn't respond. He turned back to the window, trying to process the chaos in his head. But something in the man's voice intrigued him. There was tension there, nervousness that went beyond traffic or rush. It was familiar. He knew that tone. It was the same he'd heard in his own voice the last 3 days. The car stopped at a red light. The driver grabbed his phone from the mount, checked something on the screen, and sighed deeply. Thomas noticed his hands were also trembling slightly. You okay? Thomas asked, surprising himself with his own concern. The driver looked at him through the rear view, eyes meeting for a second. I am, he responded. but didn't sound convincing. Just ... nervous. I'm getting married today. The words fell in the car like a stone in still water. Thomas felt something contract in his chest. Getting married today. He almost laughed, a bitter laugh that didn't come out. The irony was absurd. Fleeing his own wedding in the Uber of a man heading to his congratulations, Thomas said, and the word came out hollow. Thanks, the driver replied. It's ... complicated. I mean, it shouldn't be, but it is. The light turned green. The car moved again, entering the main avenue. Thomas looked at the bouquet on the front seat, at the driver's impeccable suit, and felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Empathy, envy, fear. Why are you driving Uber on your wedding day? Thomas asked, unable to contain his curiosity. The driver laughed, a short sound without humor. Good question. I got so anxious I woke up at 5 in the morning. The ceremony isn't until 4. I was pacing around the house, driving my mom crazy, so I decided to go out, do some rides, keep my head occupied. Already regretted it about 10 times. Thomas nodded slowly. He understood the need for movement, to do something, anything, to not sink into his own thoughts. And you? The driver asked, looking again through the rear view. Sorry, none of my business, but you're very dressed up for a Saturday afternoon, and you ran out of a church. Thomas felt blood rush to his face. He hadn't realized the driver had noticed. Yeah, he said, hesitant. Also a wedding, was silent returned, but now it had weight. The driver didn't ask more questions, and Thomas was grateful. He closed his eyes, trying to organize the whirlwind of emotions. Lauren at the altar, the envelope in his pocket, the letter to M, the feeling of betrayal eating at him for days, the doubt that woke him at dawn. Who was M? What was really begin? Was she waiting for the wedding to end things with someone else? Start a new life with him while hiding something? Sorry, the driver said, interrupting his thoughts. Don't want to be invasive, but, did you run? Thomas opened his eyes. The driver watched him with an expression that wasn't judgment, but recognition, as if he understood. I ran, Thomas confirmed, and the word came out like confession. Shit, the driver said quietly. That must be. I can't even imagine. It's not a decision I planned to make, Thomas said, surprised by his own honesty. But something was wrong, very wrong. And when the music started, when I saw her coming in, I just couldn't. The driver nodded, thoughtful. He drove for a few blocks in silence before speaking again. Can I tell you something? Something you might not want to hear. Thomas stared at him through the rear view. Go ahead. If you felt you needed to run, then it was probably the right thing to do, the driver said with surprising conviction. People don't flee weddings on a whim. Something made you doubt. And doubt, at the altar, isn't trivial. The words resonated in Thomas with unexpected force. That was exactly it. It wasn't a whim. It was the letter. It was M. It was the feeling, in recent days, that Lauren was hiding something, averting her gaze, being evasive. Small signs he tried to ignore, but that accumulated until they became unbearable. What about you? Thomas asked. Don't you have doubts? The driver took a while to respond. When he did, his voice was lower. I do. Of course I do. I think everyone does. Right. But mine ... I don't know. Sometimes I think they're just nerves. Other times, I think they're a sign. Sign of what? That I don't know her as well as I think. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning Thomas couldn't fully decipher. He looked at the driver, at the tension in his shoulders, at how he held the wheel, and felt a strange connection. Two men, on the same day, facing the same milestone, but with doubts consuming them. What's her name? Thomas asked, not quite knowing why. Marissa, the driver answered. And yours? Lauren. The driver nodded, as if registering the information. They continued in silence for a few more minutes, the car winding through city streets. Thomas looked at the GPS on the dashboard. Still 15 minutes to the destination he'd put in the Apo downtown hotel, a neutral place where he could think. But now, somehow, the ride seemed more than just a route. It seemed a suspended space, a limbo where he and the driver could exist outside their lives for a moment. Can I ask you something? The driver said, breaking the silence again. Sure. What made you doubt her? Your fiancé? What made you run? Thomas hesitated. Talking about the envelope, about the letter, seemed to expose something too intimate. But at the same time, there was relief in the idea of sharing, of taking the weight off his chest. I found a letter, he finally said, written by her, to someone called M. Intimate, recent, talking about a future that didn't seem to include our marriage. Or at least not the way I thought. The driver frowned. She cheated on you. I don't know, Thomas admitted. Could be. Or she might be planning something. Or there's another life she's living that I don't know about. I couldn't confront her. I kept waiting for her to tell me, for there to be an explanation. But she said nothing, kept acting like everything was perfect. Did you try asking? Thomas shook his head. I tried hinting. Asked about her past, old friends, ex-boyfriends. She always deflected. Said the past was past, and what mattered was the future. But that letter ... wasn't about the past. It was about now. The driver stayed quiet for a moment, processing, then said, Marissa's like that too, evasive, always has been. At first I thought it was just her way, reserved, but lately, I don't know. I feel there are things she doesn't tell me, places she goes that don't make sense, calls she takes in another room, little lies she thinks I don't notice. Thomas felt a chill. The similarity was unsettling. Did you confront her? I tried. She says I'm paranoid, that I'm stressed about the wedding. And maybe she's right. Maybe I'm creating problems where there aren't any. Or maybe not, Thomas said, his voice coming out firmer than intended. The driver looked at him through the rear view again, this time with different intensity. There was something in his eyes, recognition, a suspicion beginning to germinate. How did you two meet? The driver asked. You and Lauren. Thomas blinked, surprised by the subject change. An app Tinder 2 years ago. Why? Marissa too. Tinder, 1.5 years ago. Thomas felt something tighten in his stomach. Coincidence? Had to be. Millions of people met on apps nowadays. Where's she from? Thomas asked, unable to contain growing curiosity. Right here. Born and raised in the city, but lived away for a while. Seattle, I think, or Portland. She always mixes it up when she tells it. Came back about 3 years ago. Thomas felt the world spin slightly. Lauren had also lived in Seattle. She'd mentioned it once, in passing, but never went into detail. Lauren also lived in Seattle, Thomas said, voice coming out lower than intended. The driver slowed the car, as if he needed a moment to think. They were on a residential street now, trees on both sides, houses with well-kept yards, the kind of place where families lived normal lives. That single quotes S... strange, the driver said. Yeah, Thomas agreed, but it could also mean nothing. Seattle's a big city, and lots of people use Tinder, and lots of people are born and raised here and come back after time away. True, Thomas said, but his voice sounded unconvinced. They stayed silent for a while, the weight of coincidence hanging between them. Thomas tried to convince himself he was reading too much into things, that the stress of the day and the paranoia from the letter were making his mind create connections where there were none. But something in him, a small insistent voice, said there was more. What's she like? Thomas asked. Physically, I mean. Marissa. The driver looked at him with an indefinable expression. Why do you want to know? Just ... curious. The driver hesitated, but then answered. Tall, 5'8", more or less, brown hair, long, almost black, green eyes, has a small scar on her chin, from falling off a bike as a kid. She's beautiful, very beautiful. Thomas felt the air leave his lungs. 5'8", dark brown hair, green eyes. The chin scar. Lauren had the same, from the same story. He'd always found it cute, the way she touched the scar when nervous. Oh my God, Thomas said, almost in a whisper. The driver hit the brakes, stopping the car on the shoulder. He turned in his seat, looking directly at Thomas. What? Lauren is exactly like that. Height, hair, eyes, the scar, everything. Act 2. The web of coincidences, and the interpretive turn. The silence in the car was dense, almost solid. Thomas felt his heart beating in his temples, each pulse seeming to echo in the confined space. The driver was still turned toward him, hands off the wheel, eyes wide. Outside, the street followed its normal rhythm, a dog being walked, a kid riding a bike, a couple unloading groceries. Everything absolutely ordinary, absolutely distant. Has to be coincidence, the driver said, but his voice lacked conviction. He ran his hand through his hair, undoing the carefully applied gel. Lots of women fit that description. It's common, and the scar. Thomas insisted. What are the odds? The driver didn't respond immediately. He looked ahead, at the empty street, and then back at Thomas. Tell me more about her. About Lauren. Beyond appearance. Thomas took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. She works in marketing, or at least that's what she said. Freelancer. So her schedule was always flexible. Traveled a lot for client meetings, sometimes gone the whole week. I never questioned it because I trusted her. But now, ... Marissa is exactly like that, the driver interrupted, voice rising slightly. Marketing consultant, freelancer, always traveling, always with important meetings that couldn't wait. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. He pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, opened the gallery, found a photo of Lauren, taken last month, at a dinner. She was smiling at the camera, hair loose over her shoulders, green eyes shining under the restaurant light. He turned the screen to the driver. This is her. The driver looked at the photo and his face lost all color. He grabbed his own phone, trembling fingers, and opened an image, turned it to Thomas. It was the same woman, not similar, not alike, the same, Lauren Marissa. The same smile, same hair, same eyes. In a different dress, different place, but unmistakably the same person. No, the driver said, voice breaking. No, this can't be happening. Thomas felt his hands start to shake. He looked again at the photo on the driver's phone, then at his, comparing every detail. The beauty mark above the lip, the shape of the eyebrows, the way the nose curved slightly. It was her. It was impossible, absurd, but it was her. How long have you been together? Thomas asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. 1.5 years, the driver answered. And you? 2 years. The driver let out a bitter laugh, without humor. So she ... what? Was with both of us at the same time, this whole time. Thomas tried to process the information. 2 years, 1.5 years, overlapping. Lauren traveled a lot, spent days away. He'd always accepted it as part of her work, never suspected it as part of her work, never suspected. But if there was another relationship, another life, another man, the trips, Thomas said, the penny starting to drop. When she said she was traveling for work, she was with you. The driver nodded slowly, as if assembling the same puzzle. She always told me she had meetings in other cities. Left Monday, came back Thursday or Friday, sometimes gone the whole weekend. I thought it was strange, but she always had an explanation. And when she was with me, she was ... perfect, present, attentive, never imagined. Thomas felt a wave of nausea. Lauren's absences, which he'd always attributed to work, were meetings with another man. While he waited at home, planning the wedding, she was building a parallel life. Or maybe he was the parallel life. Maybe the driver was the main relationship and he, Thomas, the distraction. When was the proposal? Thomas asked. For marriage. 6 months ago. I proposed on a trip to the coast. It was ... perfect. She cried, said yes. We spent the whole weekend planning the future. I proposed 8 months ago, Thomas said, feeling reality distort. On a trail we always hiked. She cried too. Said she'd waited for this her whole life. The driver covered his face with his hands, breathing deeply. When he spoke again, his voice was muffled. How is this possible? How does someone do this? Plans to weddings, lives to lives, keeps to men. Why? Thomas had no answer. He looked at the envelope in his pocket, the letter to M. Now it made sense. M wasn't just an initial. M was the driver. Marissa was the name she used with him. Lauren was the name with Thomas. 2 identities, 2 lives, 2 futures. Does she have other things? Thomas asked. Things that bothered you, that didn't make sense. The driver lowered his hands, thinking, she never introduced me to her parents, always had an excuse, said the family was complicated, that they lived far away, that they didn't get along. I met some of her friends, but always the same ones, never new people, and she never slept at my place, even after we got engaged. Always went back to her apartment at the end of the night. Said she needed her own space, that it was her way. Thomas felt another piece click into place. She did the same thing with me. Never sleeping over, always going home. I thought it was because she valued independence. Now I see it was because she had to manage both lives. If she slept at my place, she couldn't be available for you, and vice versa. The driver let out another bitter laugh. This is insane, completely insane. Who does this, and why? Money. She never asked for anything, never charged me for gifts or trips, always split the bills, always was ... independent. Same with me, Thomas said. She always made a point of paying her share, never wanted me to cover anything. I found it admirable. Now it seems like it was just to maintain control. They stayed silent again, the weight of discovery crushing both. Thomas looked out the window, at the world outside that kept going indifferently, and felt total disconnection. An hour ago, he was fleeing his own wedding, tormented by doubt. Now, doubt had transformed into certainty, and certainty was much worse than any suspicion. Her wedding, Thomas said, breaking the silence. Your wedding with her. Where is it? Oak Street Church. At 4. Thomas looked at his watch. 2:40. Less than an hour and 20 minutes, and mine was at Maple Street Church. At 2. So she planned to marry you first, and me after, the driver said, voice loaded with disbelief. Same day. How was she going to do that? How was she going to be in 2 places at once? Thomas thought about the question, trying to understand the logistics of the absurd. Maybe she wasn't going to. Maybe the plan was to choose one at the last minute. Or maybe ... maybe she knew one of us would run, that one of us would find out. You think she knew about the letter, that you'd find it? I don't know, Thomas admitted. Could have been deliberate, could have been carelessness. Or maybe she was tired of keeping up the charade and wanted someone to find out. The driver hit his hands on the steering wheel, frustrated. But why? What's the point? If she wanted to end it, why not just end it? Why do this to us? Maybe she doesn't know, Thomas said, thinking out loud. Maybe she's trapped. Or maybe she likes the duplicity. Maybe it's a game to her. That's sick. It is. They stayed there, stopped on the shoulder, trying to process the impossible. Thomas felt rage growing inside him, but also deep sadness. 2 years of his life, 2 years of trust, plans, love, all built on a lie. And the driver he didn't even know the man's name was in the same situation. 2 strangers, united by the same woman's betrayal. What's your name? Thomas asked, realizing the absurdity of not knowing. Daniel, the driver answered. Daniel Cooper, Thomas Mitchell. They exchanged a look, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a forced complicity. What do we do now? Daniel asked. Thomas thought, the ride wasn't over yet. They were still 10 minutes from the hotel. But the hotel didn't matter anymore. Nothing he'd planned mattered. We go to her, Thomas said. Together, we confront this woman and find out what the hell is going on. Daniel looked at him, hesitant. You sure? This is going to be ... ugly, I'm sure, Thomas said with firmness he didn't expect to feel. I fled my wedding because something told me it was wrong. Now I know I was right. And you deserve to know the truth before you walk down that aisle. Daniel stayed quiet for a long moment, processing, then nodded. Okay, we'll go, but we need to think. If we just show up and confront her in front of everyone, it'll be a circus. And she might run or lie or manipulate the situation. Thomas agreed. So we need a plan. Catch her before the ceremony, in a private place, where she can't run. She must be getting ready now, Daniel said. Probably at her place. Or her mum's. Or ... Wait. She rented a suite at a hotel near the church, to prepare with the bridesmaids. That's where she should be. Which hotel? The Grand Plaza, 3 blocks from the church. Thomas thought fast. We go there. We go up, find her room, and confront her. Before she puts on the dress, before things go too far. Daniel nodded, but his expression still showed doubt. What if she denies it? What if she says, we're crazy? She won't deny, Thomas said with more confidence than he felt. Not when she sees us together. Not when we have the proof. Daniel started the car again, pulling off the shoulder and onto the street. He drove in silence for a few minutes, tension in the air almost palpable. Thomas looked at the streets passing, feeling a mixture of adrenaline and fear. What they were about to do would change everything. Not just for him and Daniel, but for Lauren or Marissa, or whoever she really was. They arrived at the Grand Plaza, a tall, elegant building downtown. Daniel parked on the street, turned off the engine, and stared at the hotel. Last chance to back out, he said. We can still leave. Pretend this never happened. Move on. Thomas shook his head. I can't. I need answers. And so do you. Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. Let's go then. They got out of the car. Thomas felt his legs shaky, but forced himself to walk. They crossed the street, entered the hotel lobby. It was luxurious, with crystal chandeliers and plush carpet. There was a wedding happening, their decorations, formally dressed guests, a buzz of celebration, but not their wedding. Another one. The world was full of weddings that day. What's the room number? Thomas asked. 1407, Daniel answered. 14th floor. They took the elevator. The ascent seemed to last forever. Thomas looked at his own reflection in the elevator mirror. Wrinkled suit, crooked tie, messy hair. He looked like a man who'd fled his own wedding, because that's exactly what he was. Daniel, beside him, also looked out of place. 2 discarded grooms, going up to confront the woman who'd deceived them. The elevator stopped. Doors opened. They walked down the hallway 1405, 1406, 14-0-7. The door was closed. From the other side, Thomas heard female voices, laughter, low music, the bridesmaids probably, helping the bride get ready. Daniel raised his hand, about to knock, but he hesitated. What are we going to say? Thomas didn't have a ready answer. But then, something in him clicked. He pulled the envelope from his pocket, unfolded the letter. We show this, and we wait for her to explain. Daniel nodded. He knocked on the door. 3 firm knocks. The voices on the other side stopped. Steps approached. The door opened. A woman round 30, green dress, hair in a bun, looked at them, confused. Can I help you? We're here to speak with Marissa, Daniel said, voice firm. The woman frowned. Who? Marissa, the bride. She's getting ready here. The confusion on the woman's face increased. There's no Marissa here. This room is Sophie's. Her wedding is later. Thomas and Daniel exchanged looks. Something was wrong. Are you sure? Daniel insisted. She rented this room to get ready for today's wedding. I'm sure, the woman said, now with a defensive tone. You must have the wrong room. Daniel pulled out his phone, checked the message that Lauren or Marissa had sent. 14-0-7. That's what it said. This is it, Daniel said, showing the screen. The woman looked and shrugged. I don't know what to tell you. This is Sophie's room. Maybe you're confused. She closed the door. Thomas and Daniel stood in the hallway, processing. She lied, Daniel said, voice empty. About the room, about the hotel, about everything. Thomas felt rage explode. Of course she lied. She lies about everything. It's what she does. Daniel ran his hands over his face, frustrated. So where is she? If she's not here, where did she get ready? Where is she now? Thomas looked at his watch. 3:15. In 45 minutes, Daniel's wedding should start. She's at the church, Thomas said. Has to be. It's the only place that makes sense. They went back to the elevator, went down, left the hotel, walked back to the car. Daniel started the engine and drove toward Oak Street Church. Traffic was moderate, the sky starting to darken with afternoon clouds. Thomas felt his heart racing, mind spinning. Lauren Marissa was somewhere, preparing for another ceremony, another lie, and they were going to stop her. They arrived at the church. It was an old building, stone, with stained glass windows and a garden in front. There were already cars parked, guests starting to arrive. Daniel stopped the car but didn't turn off the engine. I can't, he said suddenly. I can't go in there. Thomas looked at him. You have to go in. If you don't, she'll go through with it. She'll get married, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. But what if I go in and confront her, and it's a scandal? My family's there, my friends. Everyone will know. Everyone will know anyway, Thomas said firmly. The only difference is whether you find out the truth before or after. Daniel stayed quiet, looking at the church, then took a deep breath and turned off the engine. Okay, let's go. They got out of the car, walked toward the church entrance. But before they arrived, someone called out. Daniel, an older woman, navy dress, graying hair, came toward them. Daniel's mother, Thomas presumed. Mom, Daniel said, trying to sound normal. Where were you? She asked, visibly worried. You disappeared. I called 10 times. The ceremony starts in half an hour, and you weren't here. Sorry, Mom. I... had to take care of something. She looked at Thomas, confused. Who's he? A friend, Daniel said quickly. He's helping me with something. His mother frowned, but didn't press. Well, you need to get inside. Marissa's already here. She's in back, getting ready. Thomas felt his blood freeze. Marissa was here. Lauren, the woman who'd deceived both of them, was here. Meters away. Okay, Daniel said. I will. Just... Just give me a minute. His mother hesitated, but then nodded and went back inside the church. Daniel looked at Thomas. She's here, I know. What do we do? Thomas thought fast. We go in. We ask to speak with her. We don't make a scene. We just expose the truth. Calmly, directly. Daniel nodded, but Thomas saw panic in his eyes. What if she denies it? What if she makes up a story? She can't deny when we're both standing in front of her. Thomas said, not when we have the photos. Not when we know everything. They entered the church. The interior was beautiful, with wooden pews and white flowers decorating the altar. Guests chatted quietly, finding their seats. An organ played softly in the background. Everything seemed perfect, like any wedding, but Thomas knew it was a farce. Daniel went to one of the ushers, a young man in a black suit, and asked to speak with the bride. The usher looked surprised but agreed. He went to the back of the church and returned a few minutes later. "She's coming," the usher said. Thomas and Daniel waited. Time seemed to have stopped, and then she appeared. Lauren, Marissa, white dress, simple but elegant, hair in a loose bun. She was smiling, expecting a pleasant surprise. But when she saw the two together, the smile froze, her face lost color. She stopped a few meters away, looking from one to the other. "Thomas," she said, voice weak. "What? What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same," Thomas said, keeping his tone calm. "But I think I already know." She looked at Daniel, then back at Thomas, reality hitting. You met." "We met," Daniel said, voice trembling, "and we discovered something interesting. We discovered you were planning to marry both of us, same day, different names, different lives." She took a step back, as if she'd been punched. "I can explain." "Then explain," Thomas said, pulling the letter from his pocket and holding it out to her. "Explain this. Explain why you were writing letters to M while planning to marry me. Explain why you lived two lives for years. Explain why you used us." She looked at the letter but didn't take it. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but you did," Daniel said, voice breaking. "You destroyed us. You made us believe we were special, that we were loved, and it was all a lie." "It wasn't a lie," she said, voice coming out in a desperate whisper. "I loved you both. I love you both. I couldn't choose. I couldn't give up either of you. So you decided to keep both," Thomas said, rage leaking now. "Without telling us, without giving us a choice. You turned us into pawns in some sick game." "It wasn't a game," she said, tears streaming now. "I was trapped. I started both relationships without planning, and when I realized, I was already in too deep. I was afraid of losing you. I was afraid of being alone." "So you were going to marry both?" Daniel asked, incredulous. "Was that the plan? 2 weddings, 2 lives forever." She shook her head, sobbing. "I don't know what I was going to do. I just wanted more time, to figure it out, to choose." Thomas felt a mixture of rage and pity. She was there, falling apart, and part of him wanted to comfort her. But the bigger part, the wounded part, just wanted to leave. "You don't deserve more time," Thomas said firmly. "You had years, and you chose to lie. You chose to deceive us. Now you'll have to live with the consequences." He turned to leave. Daniel followed. But before they left, she called out, "Wait, please, I can, I can fix this. We can talk. There's nothing to fix," Daniel said without looking back. "It's over." They left the church, leaving her there, alone, in her wedding dress, surrounded by the ruin of her own lie. Act 3. The revealed truth and the new path. The outside air was cold, colder than Thomas remembered. He and Daniel walked in silence to the car, moving away from the church as if fleeing a fire. Behind them, Thomas imagined the chaos beginning. Lauren, or Marissa, or whoever she was, trying to explain, lie, manipulate, guests, starting to realize something was wrong. The ceremony that would never happen. Daniel opened the car but didn't get in. He stood there, hands on the hood, head down. Thomas could see his shoulders shaking, and for a moment thought he'd collapse. But Daniel just took a deep breath, wiped his face, and straightened up. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse. "For what?" Thomas asked. "For stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Thomas nodded. He felt the same, in a way. If he hadn't run, if he hadn't taken that Uber, if he hadn't discovered the truth, he'd be married to a lie now. It would be a mistake that would haunt him forever. "You saved me too," Thomas said. "If I'd stayed with the doubt, not knowing, it would have been worse." They stood there, 2 strangers who'd become accomplices in hours, united by the same woman's betrayal. It was surreal, absurd, but also strangely comforting. Thomas wasn't alone in this. There was someone who understood, who shared the pain. "What are you going to do now?" Daniel asked. Thomas thought he had no plan beyond running, discovering the truth, and now that he had it, the future was a blank page. "I don't know," he admitted. "Go home, I guess. Pick up the pieces. Try to understand what happened, and you..." "Same," Daniel said. "My mom's going to have a fit. My friends will have questions. Everyone will. But at least now I know the truth. At least now I can move forward without the lie." Thomas agreed. The truth hurt, but it was better than living in illusion. They exchanged phone numbers, a silent promise to keep in touch. It wasn't something they needed to say out loud. Both knew this experience had connected them in a way few things could. They weren't friends, not exactly, but they were something. Survivors, maybe. Daniel got in the car, but before starting the engine, looked at Thomas. "That letter," he said, "the one you found, you still have it?" Thomas pulled the envelope from his pocket, still wrinkled, still folded. "Yeah, can I see?" Thomas hesitated, but then handed it over. Daniel unfolded it, read silently. When he finished, he let out a bitter laugh. "Can't wait for us to really begin," he read aloud. "She wrote the same thing to me. In a letter I found 2 weeks ago, thought it was for me. Now I see it was generic, something she wrote to both." Thomas felt a new pang of rage. Not even the words were exclusive, not even the promises. Everything was copied, recycled, used to manipulate. "She had a script," Thomas said. "For each of us, same phrases, same gestures. Nothing was real." Daniel returned the letter. "At least now we know." He started the engine, waved to Thomas, and drove off. Thomas stood on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear down the street. Then he started walking, not back to the church he'd fled from, but just ... walking. He needed movement, air, space to think. The streets were full of late afternoon life. People walked dogs, couples had coffee at sidewalk tables, kids played in a playground. The world went on, indifferent to his drama, and somehow that was comforting. Life continued, always continued. Thomas thought about Lauren. He still called her that in his head and tried to identify when everything had started falling apart. It wasn't the day he found the letter, it was before. Small signs he ignored, inconsistencies he justified, lies he accepted because he wanted to believe. He'd been complicit in his own illusion, but there had also been good moments, moments that seemed genuine, and maybe they were, in their twisted way. Maybe she really loved them both, but in a fragmented way, unable to give herself completely. Or maybe it was all performance. He'd never know for sure. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Lauren. He hesitated before opening. "Thomas, please, give me a chance to explain. It wasn't what you think. I can tell you everything, please." He looked at the message for a long moment. Part of him, the part that still loved her, wanted to respond, wanted to hear the explanation, seek meaning. But the bigger part, the part that knew there was no meaning that justified it, didn't respond. He blocked the number and put away his phone. Thomas walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench, watched the ducks on the lake. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in orange and pink tones. It was beautiful, simple, real. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of recent months, recent years start to lighten. Not completely. It still hurt, would hurt for a while. But there was new clarity, lightness, in knowing he was no longer trapped in the lie. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. "Thanks again. Seriously, if you need anything, call me. We went through this together." Thomas smiled, the first positive expression of the day. He responded, "Same. Thanks for the ride. Turned out to be the most important ride of my life." He put away his phone and stayed there watching the day end. There would be questions to answer, explanations to give, consequences to face, but for now, he just existed, sitting on that bench, free from the lie, free from doubt. And curiously, for the first time in days, Thomas felt something like hope. 3 months later, Thomas sat in the coffee shop where he used to go with Lauren, but now the place had different meaning. It wasn't their memory space anymore, just a good coffee shop with good espresso. He was there because he wanted to be, not because he was avoiding or seeking ghosts. Daniel arrived 15 minutes later, ordered coffee and sat across from him. "How are you?" Thomas asked. "Better," Daniel said. "Much better, actually. Started therapy, hanging out with friends again, even started dating someone. Nothing serious, but ... different, honest." Thomas smiled. "I'm happy for you and you, similar. Changed jobs, needed a fresh start. I like it, and I'm meeting new people too. Taking it slow, but ... open." They talked for an hour, updating each other on the lives they'd rebuilt. Lauren or Marissa had disappeared. Some mutual friends reported she'd left the city, but nobody knew where. Thomas didn't try to find out, didn't want to. She was part of the past now, a scar that hurt less each day. "Have you ever regretted it?" Daniel asked suddenly, running, confronting her. Thomas thought about the question, really considered it. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. It was painful, it was horrible, but it was necessary. I learned something about myself, about trusting my instinct. about not ignoring signs. And I met you, which, in a strange way, was worth it. Daniel laughed. Yeah, the most bizarre friendship I've ever had, but also one of the most important. They finished their coffees, paid the bill, and left together. On the sidewalk, they said goodbye with a hug, a promise to meet again soon. Thomas walked home, hands in pockets, sun warming his face. The envelope was still there, folded, stored. He didn't know why he kept it. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as proof he'd made the right choice, or maybe just because he wasn't ready to discard it completely. But one thing he knew, he was no longer the man who defled the altar 3 months ago. He was someone different, stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more open. The experience had broken him, but also rebuilt him. And in that new beginning, that new version of himself, Thomas found something he didn't expect. It wasn't forgiveness, not for Lauren, but it was peace, with himself, with his choices, with the uncertain future opening ahead. He looked at the sky, at the clouds, moving slowly, and smiled, small, discreet, but genuine, and kept walking, toward whatever came next. Have you ever faced a moment where your instincts told you something was wrong, but you didn't know whether to trust them? A situation where the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes knowing others have faced similar impossible choices helps us feel less alone. If Thomas and Daniel's story resonated with you, if this tale about trust, betrayal, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths touched you, leave your like. And if you want more stories exploring life's complex dilemmas, the moments that test our judgment and force us to choose between comfort and truth, subscribe to the channel.